Hey there, it's Crystal Beasley. I'm here in Shanghai to speak to PhD Carole Griggs about her work in artificial intelligence and human development. She has some thoughts about what virtual reality will be good for in terms of transforming and transcending consciousness. And the good news is she thinks VR totally has that possibility. The bad is that it brings up a lot of snarly ethical questions. Welcome to Embodied Reality.
I'm Carole Griggs, and I am co-founder of iConscious.global. We've developed a map of conscious human development to show how people evolve consciously, as well as in their individual domains, emotional intelligence, body, physicality, as well as mind and uniqueness. And so we're utilizing that framework in educational institutions, as well as in an artificial intelligence project, and other various modalities.
Lovely.
Yeah.
We happen to be in Shanghai today. What brought you halfway across the world?
So I came here to present today on the model and to show what we have to offer that's a little bit different than some of the models that are currently out there. Our model is integrative in that it includes multiple domains of one's being, and it also shows the elucidation, the upper stages post-awakening in ways that has not fully been done before.
Lovely. I think certainly my concept until recently has been that there is awakening, enlightenment, sort of everybody calls it a little bit different thing. And then that's it, you've done, and it turns out there's like way more work to do, which is both exciting and like, oh God, it's not even the beginning. So I wanted to talk to you because you mentioned my favorite word, embodied. Tell me how you think about that.
So embodiment is probably one of my favorites as well. Just to give you reference, our model has 16 chapters, stages of development, and awakening is actually in chapter 7, if that gives a little perspective. And a part of that is body. How embodied is consciousness? How embodied are you? And that is actually a huge piece. A big part of awakening in what I like to call pastime, is going and sitting on the mountaintop and having a big consciousness awakening and not having any capacity for relational or much capacity for emotional intelligence or embodiment. There's a neglect of the body. And it's not the whole picture. It's a part of the picture. Mm-hmm. So part of what we teach actually is how to integrate a consciousness awakening and bring it back down into the body and live in the world from that space.
Another thing that I think I was quite eye-opened by being here is that Buddhism doesn't mean that there's lots of different kinds of Buddhism, first of all, and that it doesn't mean that you don't laugh and you're not happy and that seems much more appealing to me than having the ascetic life. Yeah. No harm to anybody who chooses that path, but that's just not my path. So I love that you are encouraging people to have emotions. Yeah. Why is it good to have emotions?
Well, they're here. And so, I mean, they're here, and I think that's why we encourage it. We just encourage to actually embrace and acknowledge what's actually already here. Thinking is here. Emotions arise. A body appears to be here. Your uniqueness, you are very unique in your own way. I'm very unique in my own way. And actually, the more consciousness expands, the more uniqueness can also come online and show itself. So rather than getting smaller and confining yourself to a particular picture of what enlightenment looks like, it actually is quite the opposite. Is how can I actually become more of who I actually am as consciousness expands.
Yeah, like be the biggest version of the weirdo that you are.
Exactly.
It's kind of how I think about it.
I love that. I love that.
So why I'm talking about the body and emotions, you were like, oh, we're trying to build VR. What are you talking about? Yeah. Is because VR uses the entire body as the controller. Yeah. And I'm curious what insights you might offer to someone who has this brand new palette of being able to use the body. And, as the game designer, you were asking people to do certain motions, and there's this big new paint box. So what would you encourage people to think about?
When it comes to developing?
When it comes to like designing an experience that someone is going to possibly use their whole body to experience.
So as somebody with a developmental background, my PhD is in professional coaching and human development. So from a developmental standpoint, I think one of the biggest things that excites me is what is our audience that we're speaking to? What developmental level are people at when they're experiencing what they're experiencing? And so if you can touch that, I think one of the most exciting VR opportunities that are out there is to help the evolution of consciousness and human development through VR.
Yes.
And right now, one of the applications we're using our model is through artificial intelligence, which is one modality. Different models and assessments, to help people figure out where they're at. And VR, I think, is another fantastic one. Gamifying it is another one. But how do we utilize these different modalities to help evolve consciousness and evolve human beings on this planet? And VR
not a small thing.
I know, right? I know.
What do you do? Get up in the morning. I'm gonna make people conscious.
It's actually what gets me up.
It's a real deal.
Yeah, it is a real deal. And VR is fantastic for that because it brings it to very an experiential level.
There's all these amazing sensors that are coming out that are helping people with meditation apps like Muse and breath sensors and heart rate variability.
Yep.
Do you use anything to help people sort of have a better sense of those things, like their heart rate and get them connected to what the insides feel like?
Yeah. So actually, I think that the different meditation apps are appropriate for different people at different stages of development. I think that's something that's really important to understand. There are some that are more universal and some that are very specific to where you are developmentally. So that is one piece. And yes, helping bring awareness to emotions, to thinking, and to the body, and helping to realize that you are not that exclusively. Yes. And then also, once you realize that you are not that exclusively, to then come back down and into the body in a way that is basically what we're calling, conscious embodiment.
Are you using any of the sensors in your practice?
We can use feedback. So we can use when the heart rate variability goes up or down, it actually gives me a lot of information, like heart math, for instance, gives me a lot of information of how integrated is the heart in this moment. And when it's not, as far as I understand with heart math, it changes to where you can see that you've gone back up into the thinking mind and you're exclusively identified with thought. So it's a great tool for people that are trying to have a better awareness around when they get caught in the thinking mind exclusively versus kind of down into the body and in a heart integrated fashion. So that is one tool that helps people really kind of regulate and become aware of that. Without a tool like that, it can be difficult to catch when you've left the body and you're just kind of spinning in the mind.
Lovely. For people who don't know what heart rate variability is, can you just give us a quick rundown of why that's important and why you care about that?
Yeah. So when you see the heart fluctuate, you can kind of tell. You can figure out whether someone has gone back up into the mind based on someone's heart rate. And so when they're back down into the body and into the heart, breathing changes as well as their heart rate. So that is actually a good external mechanism that we can utilize to help people become more aware of when they're in the body versus when they're entertaining thinking. The whole system shifts when we're entertaining the thinking mind.
What's incredibly powerful, I think, about that is that you can know what state of awareness the player would be in at that moment, and then you can adjust the game in some way or the visuals or the sound in some way to acknowledge that and either move them to a more productive state or just showing them that they have gone to that is building this much tighter feedback loop that goes, oh, that's what it feels like in my body when that is happening.
And that is probably one of the most important pieces when we're actually trying to teach people how to consciously come into the body and experience from the body's standpoint and in a heart integrated way. It's not just the heart or just the mind. Like, it's a heart integrated way where thinking still happens. It's just whether I exclusively identify with thought and then get stuck. But so if people can experientially feel when they're in their body and they're in their heart integrated in a heart integrated way, and they have some kind of mechanism to bring them back down or to remind them to come back down, then they can feel what that's like and helps them realize when they're out of it more often. So it brings more consistency to having to living in this full integrated fashion.
Is there any situations in which you would actually benefit from being in the thinking mind more than the meditative mind or in the body?
Yeah. So in my experience, I'm sure there are other philosophies out there, the more integrated and whole we are and everything is online, I find to be a really great space to be in. I don't know that it's better or worse, it's just more whole. If you're only identify with the thinking mind and you're stuck up here and everything else is kind of shut off, it's fragmented. You're partial. You're getting a partial experience of reality. So when you can expand your awareness to integrate not only the thoughts that are here, but have capacity to experience and feel and see also what's happening in the heart space, as well as what's happening in the body. It's a much different experience of what's here than if you're exclusively stuck in one of the domains.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like we are so distrustful of the body in the West, especially. Can't be trusted and will lead you to astray and all this the Protestant sort of ethic around body shaming and all of that. But as it turns out, you observe more if you're connected to the body. You are clearer thinking. You make better decisions. You make better insights if you're more connected to your body.
The place where people leave the body is often because there's stuck energies, stuck beliefs, emotions that are not integrated, or old stuff hanging out, dualities that are not yet integrated and loved. And are pushed away, hated, so that's often why people try to come up and out of the body. They don't want to actually feel what's here. So it can be a tender experience to guide somebody back down into the body, knowing that they're going to bump into anything and everything that has yet to be integrated as a part of the whole.
Beautiful.
Which can be a very scary experience for many, which is why it's actually a very tender thing to help guide somebody back down into their own system.
This brings up such a great segue into being responsible for people's emotional well-being. If you are playing in this space, it is a very powerful space, and I know that you are looking at this from a very looking at it from all angles. Maybe some of the people who are just starting to dabble in this and don't maybe realize how powerful connecting people to their body is and how much stuff it can actually bring up. If you were going to bring all that stuff up, I feel like you have an obligation to at least pass them off to somebody that can help them work out those things.
Absolutely. I get the chills with that mostly because it's a big deal to guide somebody back down in their body. It's from a somatic standpoint. It's not child's play. It's people bumping into their deepest fears and terrors and incongruencies and. The most loving thing you can do for somebody is to, if that's the space you're going to guide somebody into, is have a practitioner or a coach or a professional that can actually be a part of that process in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. I think there's a very big conversation that needs to be had around the ethics of AR and VR because it's such a powerful medium, and it feels almost like non-consensual. I was doing one of the onboarding experiences with Oculus, actually, and this is the experience that's supposed to make you excited to explore this world, and it fades up from black, and there's an alien standing really close to you. And I was like, nope, 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 and I hit the button to skip out forward. And as I sort of shut my eyes to calm a little bit, I was thinking, I know the next experience is going to be standing on a ledge and looking out. And sure enough, it was. I'm like, the fuckers. That's not okay. You don't have to convince me that this is powerful. I know I'm an expert in all, like, I know more about VR than most of the people that are doing it, but I don't think they need to be convinced of the power of it either. They're going to get convinced really quickly.
Yeah. And my question is, what's the motive?
Right.
And where's the motive coming from? What's the purpose of leading somebody off a cliff? In my ideal world, as a developmentalist, I come from the developmental standpoint. One of the most powerful things we can do for society when it comes to VR is to create a VR that actually evolves for the consciousness of the planet from an individual standpoint and a collective standpoint. And so if we can use VR as a modality to help do that, to take somebody in their current stage of development, consciously, emotionally, mentally, unique-wise, and in their body, and help, by utilizing virtual reality to help elevate that and shift the level of consciousness on our planet, to me, like, that is probably one of the most powerful ways that we can use VR to change the world.
Absolutely.
And not just in a giving... like a state shift, like states of consciousness or different state experiences, non-dual state experiences are great. They're mystical experiences and they're wonderful. They actually do help rattle and give you perspective that's other than the one that you're currently living in on a regular basis, which actually does help shift your stage of development. But to create a virtual reality system that actually guides people from their current stage of development into a wider, broader, more expansive, more complex capacity, to me, is one of the most beautiful ways that we can use virtual reality, rather than trying to scare the bejeebies out of them by throwing an alien in front of them and then tossing them off the cliff.
It's a big vision that you just laid out.
Yes.
We've got all these new paint colors, and a lot of that is because you're using the whole body to control things, and we can connect you to that. And I just want to, like, rattle the cage bars and go, do you have any idea what this is? It's huge.
It's a big undertaking, I think, to utilize this in a developmental standpoint, but I also think that there are so many different ways in which this can be used. I do a lot of corporate coaching and work with CEOs and whatnot, but can you imagine if we actually use this VR to help evolve the level of consciousness in a CEO who impacts thousands of people on a daily, regular basis? So when you think out of it from that perspective, it is kind of a big undertaking, but we do have models that are currently out there that can be utilized to create scenarios and experiences from with somebody on a virtual in a virtual space, to help expand their degree of consciousness and embodiment and how they are in the world and how they see themselves, how they see others, and how they experience the world.
Coming back to the questions of the ethics, what do you want to say to people about how they can be good stewards of people's brains and selves?
The human system is much more delicate than most people are aware of, especially in vulnerable spaces where you have captivated their complete attention. And I can't emphasize enough, I get chills thinking about it, the power and responsibility that we have as developers for virtual reality, knowing that you have their full captivity. And what are we feeding people? Are we feeding them something that's going to help the evolution of their current state of being? Or are we helping to scare them and contract them? Are we expanding or are we contracting? That would be the question I would ask in every slide that you create in virtual reality. Does this expand somebody or is this going to contract somebody? At least is it intended to expand or is it intended to contract? Because you may create something that's intended to expand somebody and actually creates contraction, but that's its motive. What is the motive in every moment? And the other thing I want to say too along this line is the level of consciousness that's creating it, that creates the VR, is going to be the level of consciousness that's spread. So
we got some homework to do on ourselves.
So one thing that would be important for me in working with a developer for virtual reality, component would be where are they specifically developmentally, because the person who develops it, that product will be developed from that level of consciousness.
Right.
And likely targeted to an audience at that level of consciousness. So how aware are we of what level we're at and what we're creating and what we're emitting into the world? Because what we create, what level of consciousness we create from is what we're literally putting out into the entire universe.
Right. Do you think that, I would hate to think that if you're not at this super high bodhisattva, Buddha, enlightenment, that you can't make content in this space. Do you think that there's benefit in somebody being a couple levels above what they're targeting for, and that we know that most people in the United States are in this 2, 3, 4 level? Like, do you need to be 16?
No,
can you be like
question.
7?
Yeah, actually you can. Actually, just being 1 or 2 steps ahead can be beneficial. Because if you're 1 or 2 steps ahead, you're that much more expansive. You can actually see where people are at and offer them to that next level. But even if somebody is a VR specialist per se, and they are in chapter 6, if they had somebody on the team that was supporting them from even just a consulting standpoint that's in a higher stage of development, that is sometimes enough to kind of help elevate it. I mean, you can't expect every single developer out there in the virtual reality world to be at a high stage of consciousness. You can't. But if you can get consultants on board to help support that larger vision, I think you create a team of people that can help elevate what is being produced.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's a much happier idea.
Yeah.
I think perhaps it's true that if you get a lot further ahead, that you wouldn't necessarily empathize with people as much.
I love that. So in our model, per se, chapter 6 is what we call inclusive. Chapter 6 is actually the first stage of development where an individual can look back at all previous stages and have an understanding and empathy for it. Prior to that, if you're in stage 3, you pretty much don't like people in stage 2. You have a lot to say about people in stage 2, and you have a lot to say about people in stage 4. There's a problem. You have a problem with people below you, and have a problem with people above you, and you only resonate with people that you're at that same level. And it's literally not until you're at level 6 or stage 6, we call chapter 6, that you're actually able to see 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as purposeful, as they have a place on this planet, as it's okay that they exist.
Right.
It's transcend and include. So you transcend one stage and then you include it. You transcend it and include it. You transcend it, include it. So you're not transcending and chopping off.
Yeah.
So you can find yourself. I can find me, per se. I can find those characteristics in all the previous stages, and it's very inclusive. So there's a yesness to and an inclusiveness to people on this planet when you get to stage 6. So there's more of a compassion, empathy for others comes online at chapter 6. Prior to that, there's usually a problem with everybody else other than your stage.
Can you give us a really quick run through of what the first 6 stages are?
Sure. So 1 is survival. You're going to get early childhood in that one. 2 is self-centric. So you're only literally aware of me. Like I'm literally only aware of me. If I was holding a piece of paper and it was black on one side and red on the other, and I said, what color do you think I'm looking at? You would say black, even though I'm looking at red. I mean, it's you can only see what you see, and you can't even fathom that the other person could see something different. So the capacity for perspective taking is minimal. A large amount of people on this planet are in stage 2.
I'm thinking of all the Facebook conversations that have gone badly.
And some people's center of gravity might be in like a stage 4, but they have bouts of stage 2 that get pulled back into. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
I almost feel like Facebook pulls us back into those.
It possibly could, you know?
Because it's like driving the addiction and pushing the...
Yeah, a whole nother topic on social media and what that does to people, absolutely. Stage 3, what we call chapter 3, is conforming. So I am now, so consciousness expands from just me and myself and my little world, my little bubble, that this is all that exists, and it expands to me and my tribe. So it's me and my family, me and my church, me and my community.
People that you identify with.
Think about middle school and your girlfriends in middle school. It's like if you're in the clique, you're in the clique. If you're out, you're out.
Yeah.
So that is very much still alive, in North America as well as other places all over the world. Chapter 4 is rational striving. So you move from the conforming stage and you expand into more self-authoring, what we call. the capacity to be individualized a little bit more. You break away from the crowd, you break away from the need to be a part of this community, and you are kind of your own person, this autonomy. Corporate America, chapter 4, is very much the rational, striving, the goal-oriented.
Got it. Like that's where they're trying to get people.
Yeah.
Which is very reasonable.
And you have to move through these stages.
Yeah.
You go from 3 and you start to leave, what we call you disintegrate out of 3, and you move into 4. And then you're in 4. Some people die in stage 2. I mean, some people are in one stage for 10 years.
Yeah.
This is not something that typically changes like overnight. Stages typically last a little bit longer than that. Years usually, until you become more aware of it, and then it starts to speed up. Or if you work with a developmental coach of some sort,
Sure.
and they can help speed up that process. So rational striving is very much the individual's goal achiever type. 5 is equality harmony. And equality harmony is much more, it's back to the collective. So it's about everybody being equal. And the big thing about the stage is there's no hierarchy. The disdain for hierarchy, and everybody is one. We're all in this together. We're not separate. We're not individuals. It's coming out of that individual and into the group collective, and we're all have equal rights and all that. So each one of these stages actually serves a purpose, and then you kind of grow out of it, but you also include elements of it. And so you evolve out of that and into chapter 6, which is inclusive. And it's, again, like I said, it's the first time where previous identities start to crumble, ideas of who you think you are start to dissolve, belief structures that you held so tightly start to kind of get pulled out from underneath you, and you start to really question kind of, who am I? If I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, like, who am I? And there's also, like I said, there's all the previous stages have their place. It's no longer like they don't belong, or they're wrong and I'm right, or anything like that. You kind of grow and expand out of that, and you can kind of hold that everybody has a place on this planet. And chapter 7 is what we call awakening. And so chapter 7 is where exclusive identification with thinking starts to dissolve, exclusive identification with emotion starts to dissolve, exclusive identification with the body starts to dissolve.
Interesting.
And we often wake up in different ways. So there's a consciousness awakening where I realize that I am consciousness itself. There's an emotion awakening or a heart awakening, and it's kind of an intimacy with all things. There's an in-loveness with everything and everybody in a way that is very difficult to put into words. And there's a body awakening. So there's all different kinds of awakenings. And it's basically like a disidentification from the exclusive identification of that. So no longer exclusively identify with any of these things. And it's touching into infinity, really, and infinite nature. Chapter 8 is oscillating. So there's an oscillation between my personal self, this tangible personal self of who I am, and this infinite nature of consciousness. And so there's often an oscillation back and forth, am I this, am I that? Like, got it, lost it. In enlightenment, got it, lost it. And I'll stop at chapter 9 just so we don't go through the whole thing. Yeah. But chapter 9 is embodiment, which is why I wanted to mention chapter 9.
Yay!
So chapter 9 is one of my favorites to talk about because it's not just about an awakening experience and waking up to consciousness itself, and then the game's over. It's actually where life starts. Life starts at an awakening. And so chapter 9 is really coming back down into the body. It's not just about transcending life and hanging out in this spaciousness and out on a mountaintop, and it's not like that anymore. We don't get the luxury. I don't even know if it's a luxury, but we don't get the luxury of that anymore. It's actually consciousness comes back down into the body. In order for that to happen, it starts to bump into any shadows or any dualities that have not yet been dealt with or loved or brought back and allowed to be here, will be brought up to be accepted and loved in the space. So it's very much an embodied experience. And how does consciousness come back into the system and then move out into the world? And that is probably one of the most exciting topics for me, because what would it be like if we were amidst a bunch of individuals that have had consciousness awakenings or whole being awakenings in a way that's integrated back into the system and living your full potential in the world? It's my experience in working with people that you can't live a from your full potential until there is this kind of awakening and embodiment in an integrated whole fashion.
Do we really? Is this a crazy idea? Do we even want to do VR body stuff because it is so powerful?
I do. But I do from an understanding of development. That's the part that excites me. I don't know how useful VR is going to be without any kind of developmental model. That's coming from a developmental person, so take it for what it's worth on that. But if we actually understand the stages of growth that a human goes through, and we created VR in a way that honed into that, I think that is the most powerful thing we can do. But if we're just a shot in the dark and we're creating these experiences for people and hoping that they're going to develop, I think it's just a shot in the dark.
Well,
it's
there's
kind of
no
like
context.
There's no context, and it's basically how can we create, induce a state other than where they currently are in order to maybe shift something. But I think we can be more intentional than that, and that's the part where I think developmental models come in. Is how do we become more intentional with bringing an experience to somebody in a way that can shift their current space, and that intention is where I get really interested and intrigued.
I love that. That's good, because I do have that legit question. Like, are we playing with fire? Is this really a bad idea?
And I think it can be playing with fire if there's not a level of awareness of the motivation and the purpose. What is the motivation for what we're doing? Bringing an alien right in front of you and then bringing you to a cliff's edge? Why? I mean, I don't. Maybe there's a useful element to that, but I don't know. It's just why.
I feel like the reason that they did that is because they wanted people to have a visceral reaction. I just want to have a positive visceral reaction.
I get it. I totally get it. And I think it's again motivation, right? Is the motivation just to get you to react? Like, I'm, as a professional coach, that's not my motivation. My motivation is to tenderly hold you while we start to investigate some of the fears of you becoming more embodied, and that's actually a very tender process, rather than a very startling. I'm going to throw an alien in front of you and scare the bejeebies out of you. Now your body contracts.
Yeah.
When you're in a state of contraction, the capacity for change,
you have none.
None. So it's how do we support a human? So I guess this would be a useful tool, is how do we create an environment that actually softens and opens it? I mean, there's got to be a sense of openness in order for change and shifting to be able to take place. You can't change somebody from a state of contraction.
I love that you're modeling in your body what it looks like.
Yeah.
Because if you're making a VR experience and you're not sure whether you're doing a good thing or a bad thing, you've bought my idea that you should make people happy and not scared, and you want to do that, I think you literally can look at their body language.
Absolutely.
You can learn so much. And sometimes as a researcher, you have to just not even hear what people are saying, because as a creator, they know that this is your baby, and I love it so much. Their body will not lie to you.
The body never lies, ever. So, which is why in my coaching practice, I'm tracking the body. I'll hear your words, but when I'm listening to your words, I'm actually feeling into your state of consciousness, your stage of consciousness, and I'm also watching your body and how your body is responding to me, because that helps me know whether there's contraction or expansion. Is something I'm saying creating a knot in you? And if so, where's the knot and what is that knot? And we can explore that knot. And so for somebody in a virtual reality space, watch the body. Use a heart rate variability. Is their heart rate going nuts, or is it softening and relaxing and there's more spaciousness in the system? If there's more spaciousness in the system and relaxation, you now have the capacity to invoke positive change. But unless they're in that state of openness, I think that the possibilities for change diminish dramatically.
Totally agree.
So again, it goes back to motivation. Is the motivation to accelerate development and support people to progress in life, or is it something else? If it's something else, then moderating their heart rate variability or expansion and contraction, like, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the point is just to scare the hell out of people and it's just fun, but at least tell them that that's what they're in for. Like, hey, let's watch a horror movie.
Completely.
But,
and we do that. There's people who love horror movies, and and it just works for their brain.
Right.
It doesn't work for my brain,
Right.
and that's fine.
I get it. I'm the same way. I'm the same way. VR can be an incredibly powerful tool, and I just would love for people who are developing these to really grok the power that it has, and to be really mindful as to the sensitivity of a human instrument. And when you've captivated their full attention, and it actually does affect their body, to become aware of every little piece that you program into that their body is going to experience what you're putting in there. So
Absolutely.
what are we invoking in
Yes.
people?
Absolutely.
What are we promoting and what are we invoking? Like a movie you can watch and it can definitely invoke things in you. But VR is even that much more powerful because you're in it and you're feeling it to a degree that there's not as much separation as there is between you and a film you're watching. So there's a responsibility in VR that should not be overlooked.
I look forward to talking much more about that as we progress as a medium and figure out what it's good for. I certainly have my suspicions for what sorts of things it could enable that would be super positive for people. Yeah, let's keep talking about that stuff.
I think it's a needed topic for sure. I mean, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, all these new technologies can be incredible tools for the evolution of humanity, and it can be incredibly destructive. So again, like it goes back to motivation and intention and the degree of the level of consciousness that's actually creating it.
Is there any sort of insight bubbling on the back burner, something that you suspect is true but can't quite prove it yet?
In what regard?
In any regard.
That I suspect is true?
Yeah, just like something that's bubbling around on your back burner.
Interesting question. I suspect that it's true that in our lifetime, the tipping point for awakening for a big enough percentage of humanity is possible. I really do, and I have chills in that comment. I don't know how many are on board with that concept, but I'm in the world of scaling this possibility and utilizing artificial intelligence and VR and other modalities of technology. I think are part of that back burner feeling that I do have, that it is possible to have a tipping point where people are really waking up on a large scale. It's not enlightenment, if you will. It doesn't have to be something that's only for the guru.
Right.
It's not like that anymore. There are everyday people walking on this planet that have had awakening experiences and are living in living in the everyday
You don't
workplace.
have to sit on a cushion for 30,000 hours.
No, you don't. You really don't. You really don't.
That's great.
And so I
we're
do
all
think
busy.
it's possible.
We're not like...
And can you imagine doing the same thing that you're doing, chop wood, carry water, but just from a different way of experiencing self, other, and world? And so you don't have to change your art, your craft. You may still be doing interviews, but it'll just be from a different space,
Yeah.
Or I might be doing what I'm doing, but from a different space. Somebody who is in the virtual reality world, developing things like that, are going to be still having their craft, but from a different level of consciousness that affects how they go about doing what they do.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Everything's okay, I'm just trying to act my age. Everything's okay.